Hey guys, Kellen back here with Inside Out Precision, and today we're going to be talking about arrow rests. I'm going to be covering the three most common style rests that we see out there and the mechanical differences in them and why one might benefit you over another, whether you're going to be hunting or target shooting. So the first and probably still most common style rest that we see for target setups is what we call the blade style rest. So this is made by Spot Hogg. This is the Edge. And you can see here that the launcher on this is just this little spring steel blade here. So it has very minimal contact, which is why it's so appealing to target archers. And the reason for that is that if I have a rest that contacts a lot of the arrow, and when I shoot, the vanes hit that rest a little bit differently, it's going to kick the back of that arrow one way or the other. So if all my nocks aren't indexed exactly the same and those arrows, one vane hits it this way, the other one's a little more vertical, the other one's a little bit the other way, it's going to cause flight issues, which ultimately will result in a miss. So the appeal of these rests is that I have minimal contact here. This just sits right between the two bottom vanes. And when I shoot, it's pretty easy with a little bit of time at tuning and at the range to get all my vanes indexed to where I'm getting very minimal contact and more importantly the same contact arrow to arrow. So it's a really popular rest for target. Some have an adjustable tension, and this whole mechanism has a spring in it, and you can adjust the spring tension. This particular one does not, but what you can do is swap these little blades out. They make 8 thousandths thickness blades, 10 thousandths, and 12 thousandths. And based on the arrow that you're shooting, that will determine, what thickness blade I want to run. Now, generally speaking, most adults, whether it be, a 3D setup or, a carbon indoor arrow, something like that, a 10 thousandth blade is going to be just fine. They do make these this is a narrow launcher. They do make them that are a little bit wider. I generally like to run them as narrow as I can. In fact, on for my really skinny little outdoor arrows, I'll even shave this down on a grinder a little bit so that I'm getting less contact with the vanes. On this particular one, I have a 10 thousandth blade, and then I also have this little backer. Try and focus on that. Oh, come on. This little backer on it right here. So it just stiffens it up a little bit more. And the reason for that is that my arrows were like 780 grains and they had a ton of point weight. And if it's too weak, one of two things will happen. Either when that arrow's fired, it pushes that blade down, it bends it down too much. And then at the very back of the arrow, once there's not as much weight, that blade will spring back up and it'll kick the back of your arrow high. So you'll get a tail high tear no matter what you do with your nocking point. Or what will happen is that it'll just push that thing out of the way so much that you'll actually get a tail low tear or just really erratic arrow flight because there's not enough support there. So you can kind of play around. If you're shooting real light arrows, maybe you're a youth or a woman who you only have 26-inch draw length and you're shooting like a 600 spine arrow that only weighs 340 grains, an 8 thou blade would be plenty for you. This particular one is micro adjustable. So in this one, we'll adjust my height here so I can move it just a tiny little bit, like 100th or 64th of an inch, which is really nice for if you're doing any sort of walk back tuning or bear shaft tuning where just the tiniest difference in your rest can make a big shift in impact at 50 or 60 yards. Or if you're bear shaft tuning, if I'm hitting an inch difference between my bear shaft and my fletch shaft, I can adjust this just a tiny little bit and bring those two arrows together. It also has the vertical micro adjust, or the horizontal on the bottom here, so I can run it left and right. Just a really solid rest. I've never had one of these break on me. There's really not much that can go wrong with them. I do recommend carrying backup blades because you can bend these pretty easily if you hook them on like a belt loop or something when you're carrying your bow. So I do always carry backup blades, but they go on and off real easy right here, and you can replace them quickly. So that's a very common style for target. I would not use one of these for hunting because A, your arrow when you draw it against this metal blade makes noise, and B, there's so little that your arrow is resting on that it's really easy for that arrow to fall off one way or the other, and then it's going to clank around, and that's not a good deal for hunting. So I would never shoot one of these for hunting, but for target, they're an extremely popular, successful rest. I don't even know how many thousands of tournaments have been won with this style rest. Moving into the next style, this is what we call a cable-driven drop-away, meaning that the cord on the rest attaches to my cable, and when I draw the bow, if the rest is in the down position, when I draw, the bus cable pulls the rest up, and then when I shoot, it falls out of the way. When this cord moves back up, it relieves the tension and it drops. Now, one cool thing about this is the QAD HDX. This one has seen better days. We need to replace the launcher on it. But I can lock this rest in the up position and knock an arrow, and it's not going to fall out of there. It's what they call full containment. So if I'm making a stalk or I'm crawling, my arrow's not going to flop around at all in this. It's going to stay put really well. So that's nice for a hunting scenario. Now for a target shooting, these are not very popular. And the reason for that is because the cables move so rapidly when I draw the bow and shoot the bow. This rest doesn't pick up until probably the last 6 or 7 inches of when I'm drawing the bow. And then when I shoot, those cables move so fast that it drops out of the way really, really fast. So I don't get very much support on the arrow from the launcher here. So for particularly older bows that have a lot of nock travel, it can be really hard to get these to tune because generally that nock it's starting high and moving low as I shoot. And without the support here, it's much harder to get a consistent tune. There's just not enough support on the arrow, and they're really finicky. You'll get, you got to really move things around to get a bullet hole. So because of that, on the target side of things, they don't have quite the tunability that most guys are looking for. Like on the blade, I can just micro that rest one way or the other, and because I'm getting full support, it's going to influence that arrow more. Whereas a rest like this, when it falls out of the way, it no longer has any bearing on what that arrow is going to do, so it makes it harder to influence what that arrow is going to do. And when I say tuning, I'm not talking about just getting a bullet hole through paper. I'm talking about bear shaft tuning or walk back tuning, a little more precise tuning. And these just don't quite have the support that I personally like and a lot of other target shooters would like to see in their rest. But nonetheless, we've installed a ton of these. Again, this is the QAD HDX. Of the cable-driven drop-aways, this is probably one of our favorites. We see them fail less often than other brands, which I won't mention here. But if you want to shoot me a message, I can kind of steer you in the right direction. So that's a cable-driven rest, really popular. The next style, and this is pretty much our personal favorite, is what you call a limb-driven drop-away. So this cord will actually go all the way down to either the bottom limb or some rest attached to the top limb. And whereas the cable-driven rest, I can flip into the up position, this one will always be, when the bow is at rest, this one will always be in the down position because those limbs are deflexed and it's pulling this cord and that spring down. Then when I draw the bow, the tension relieves on the limb, thus allowing the cord to move up and the launcher to come up into the up position. Now what's cool about these is because the limb moves so much slower than the cables do during the shot, I can really time this rest to start picking the arrow up as soon as I start pulling the string and not drop until maybe the last 6 or 8 inches before that string comes to a stop. So what that allows me to do is get much more support out of this rest while still getting full clearance on my vanes when they pass through the carriage here. A cable-driven rest is a lot harder to time. You're kind of limited to where that cable can only go so tight before it starts actually torquing or pulling on your bus cable. So you're really limited. And a cable-driven rest will usually only stay up for 10, maybe 12 inches of the arrow before it falls out of the way. These I can time to where it's going to stay up for 22 inches of the arrow before it falls out of the way, giving me a lot more support, a lot more tunability, and ultimately better arrow flight. So these have actually been, we put them on, we try and steer people towards these for any hunting setup, and they've actually become a lot more popular in the target world. If you caught my video on my personal setup, I recently just installed the new Hamm Hybrid Target Pro on mine, and that has a a little bit different launcher than these. It's more like the blade rest, but it's still a drop away rest. So again, I'm getting minimal contact while the arrow is on there, and then it's actually fully dropping out of the way, so my veins are going to clear. And I can play around with where I mount this on the limb, whether it's closer to the tip or a little bit further towards the limb pocket, and it will change when that rest picks up and drops. And you know, I can answer some questions on tuning if you're having trouble with it, but generally between the timing of this cord, the tension of the cord, and the position of it on the limb, we can almost always get these to shoot a perfect hole through paper. And then if you're doing any walk back tuning or anything, and you're just moving that rest a little bit, you know, this has the laser engraved etchings here to where I can loosen this screw here, tap this over a 64th or a 32nd. And it's not micro adjustable in the sense this particular one isn't. And by the way, this is the Trophy Taker Smackdown Pro. I don't think I mentioned that. They do make this one with a micro adjustable knob. This one, particular one does not. But generally speaking, once you get these set, you're not going to be moving them around a bunch. So spend a little bit of time on the initial setup, but then they're pretty much going to be good, unless you're going between like a really big indoor shaft to a tiny little outdoor shaft to a hunting shaft. But most of the time, people have, you know, separate bows for target and hunting. So really, really cool rest. I've had this one for 4 years now, and it has never failed me. Again, that's a Trophy Taker Smackdown Pro. We've installed thousands of these things over the years, and they're just a really solid rest. These retail for, I think, $124.99, and then the micro adjustable one is $169.99. But both are great. Have very little issues with them, and yeah, just a great rest. So the next rest I have, this is the Hamm Hybrid Hunter Pro. So the mechanism is the same as the one that was on my target bow, but the launcher blade here, you can see it takes up this whole carriage, so that no matter where my arrow is in here, when this lifts up, it's going to pick up my arrow. This rest has the micro adjustability, so I can loosen this top little screw here and then just turn this knob, and it will run my rest back and forth, left to right, very minorly. Or I can loosen this one here and screw this bottom knob, and it'll micro adjust it up and down. So if you're doing some walk back tuning or bear shaft tuning, you just need to move that rest a tiny little bit. It alleviates the potential of, you know, trying to tap it over and over correcting and then not knowing where you were before. So really, really popular rest. It is a little bit bulkier than most other rests, but it's got a great mechanism. It's got dual ball bearings here. Really, really smooth. It's quiet, and again, you can adjust the tension in the cord and where you mount it on the limb to where you're getting the most amount of support, but still full clearance. So that's been a really, really popular rest. The third limb-driven fall away we have, this one is made by Vapor Trail. This is the Gen 7, and the first thing that struck me about this rest when we got it is it just looked too simple to me at first. It was like, man, it's just this one little bar. There's no micro adjustability, but the more we've played with this thing, we have really, really started to like it. So it's a very simple mechanism here. There's not a bunch of springs. I can't adjust the tension of the spring in this, but it doesn't take very much tension in the cord to operate, which I like because there's less potential for that paracord to stretch on you, thus changing the timing of your rest. And then I can also, more so even than the other rests, I can get this thing to pick up just right away and then drop, I mean, at the very last second. So I really, really like this rest. It doesn't have the micro adjustability, but it does have your laser engraved marks here so that I can, you know, when I am tapping it, I have a reference as to where I was before in case I do overcorrect. I can come back to where I was. You also have the ability to, you know, mount this in different positions on your bow. You know, a little more forward or a little more back. That's going to help with some torque tuning stuff, which might be a little above, you know, what we're talking about today, but we can get into that in later videos. One thing I do really like about this is how wide this launcher blade is. So it's a little different style launcher, but no matter where my arrow is in here, it has to be picked up when this comes up like that. It doesn't matter if it's all the way in one of these corners. This arrow rest will pick it up when you draw back. So for a hunting scenario, once it's in there, you never have to look at it again. It's going to be in the right spot when you come to full draw. It's also coated here in kind of a polyurethane, so it's really, really quiet. My arrow, if it moves around in that carriage, is not going to chatter at all, whereas with a lot of the other ones, you kind of have to felt the inside there just in case, your arrow slips off, or when I'm walking around, these are always in the down position, so I can't cock it up like I can with the cable driven. And so the arrow will move in this carriage, but it's not going to, again, it has to be picked up as soon as that tension is relieved. Even if it's all the way over on the side here, when it picks up, it's going to slide down into the middle. So really quiet rest, great mechanism. We've installed a bunch of these since they came out. We have not seen any of them come back. More and more target guys are going to limb-driven followaways, particularly the Hamm ski seems to be really popular. And again, the reason for that is because I can time them to where I have enough support to where I can really get a good tune out of my arrow. So if I'm bare shaft tuning or walk back tuning, there's enough support here that it will influence the arrow throughout the shot. Whereas with the cable-driven rest, it gets out of the way so fast that once it's out of the way, there's nothing to keep that arrow on track if it starts going, one direction. So these have actually become a lot more popular in target archery recently. I just installed one on my bow. I installed the Hamski Hunter Hybrid or Target Hybrid Pro. This is the Hunter Hybrid Pro. And again, the big difference is just in the launcher blade here. The mechanism is identical. So anyway, these are all great rests. We carry them all here at the shop. So you can go to thebowrack.com or give us a call and pick one up. With any purchase of the rest, we do install it for free. So come on down or get online. We can get you hooked up with one of these. I hope that answers some of the questions on rests that you guys might have. If you do have any more questions, I know I kind of covered a lot there in a short amount of time, but please feel free to comment or shoot us a message on Instagram at inside_out_precision. Give us a follow on there if you haven't already. We go over a lot of the stuff. We'll announce a lot of the stuff on there that we're going to do on YouTube, and then I have a lot of just cool little tech videos and shooting videos and stuff that you might get something out of. So again, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button below if you haven't already, and remember, precision is a decision.